I was 27 and 2 weeks away from marrying the man I thought I'd spend forever with. Dylan and I had been together for 4 years through career changes, family drama, and even a 6-month long-distance stretch when I relocated for work. He was the one who held me during panic attacks, who made late-night pasta while I stressed over campaigns, who whispered about our future babies when we couldn't sleep. So imagine the sound of my world shattering when I came home early from a conference flight changed due to a storm and found my younger sister Felicity in my bathrobe sipping coffee on Dylan's couch. At first, I thought she was house-sitting. Maybe Dylan had asked her to check the plants, grab a package. But then she laughed, barefoot, relaxed, and called over her shoulder, "Babe, you're out of almond milk again." I froze. My breath caught in my throat. Dylan emerged from our bedroom, shirtless, looking like someone who'd just woken from a nap he didn't want interrupted. The silence between us was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. "Vivian!" He started, his voice low, guilt creeping in like smoke. "We didn't mean for it to happen like this, as if there was ever a right way to betray someone." I left without grabbing anything. No shoes, no phone charger. Just my car keys and the ring I yanked off my finger before placing it gently on the entryway table. That night, I drove around aimlessly until the sun came up. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even call anyone. I was too hollow to react. When I finally told my mother, she sighed and said, "Well, maybe Dylan just connects better with someone more his pace. Felicity's always been a little fragile." That was the moment I realized it wasn't just Dylan who betrayed me. It was my whole family. Felicity didn't steal my fiancé. She was handed him wrapped in a ribbon of family excuses. The silence from the people who should have defended me hurt more than anything Dylan had done. I wasn't just heartbroken. I was erased, replaced. And the worst part, they expected me to take it with grace, to smile through the humiliation. I didn't scream at anyone. I didn't throw plates or make a scene. But from that day forward, I started planning my comeback. Not to win him back. Not to prove anything to my sister. But to show all of them that Vivian Carter wasn't someone you could betray and expect to break. 4 months passed, but the betrayal hadn't dulled. I didn't reach out to anyone. I focused on breathing, surviving, functioning. I returned to work, poured everything into managing PR nightmares for other people, while ignoring the one unraveling in my own life. My apartment became a haven of solitude, no photos, no shared memories, just white walls and quiet. Then, one Wednesday morning, a cream-colored envelope arrived in my mailbox, thick with pretension, and sealed with wax like it was from a royal court. I already knew who it was from before opening it. The handwriting was Felicity's. Inside was an ivory wedding invitation with gold trim. "Felicity Carter and Dylan Harper request the honor of your presence at their union." The words blurred as my stomach turned. My eyes caught the final line. "We hope you'll prove you've moved on by showing up with grace." Grace. That's what they wanted from me. As if my silence wasn't already the greatest act of grace they'd ever receive. My phone buzzed with messages before I could process the bile rising in my throat. My mother's text read, "It would mean a lot to the family if you attended. Let's be adults about this." Translation, "Let's pretend nothing happened." My aunt chimed in with, "Don't give them the satisfaction of thinking they broke you." And my former best friend, who still went to brunch with Felicity, messaged, "I hope you come. It would be so strong of you." They didn't want healing, they wanted a performance. So I decided to give them one, but not the one they expected. A week later, I was at a corporate gala in Seattle, half-heartedly nursing a glass of champagne, when a tall man with quiet confidence approached. Ezra Langston. The Ezra Langston, rising real estate investor tech strategist, and coincidentally, Dylan's professional idol. We talked about everything except our personal lives. I made him laugh. He made me forget. Near the end of the night, he asked if I wanted to get coffee sometime. I took a risk and told him about the wedding. He listened, not with pity, but with curiosity. Then he smiled and said, "Well, Vivian, if you're going to make an appearance, you might as well do it with style. How do you feel about dramatic entrances?" I raised an eyebrow. "You're offering to be my +1." He sipped his drink. No, I'm offering to be your statement. If you've ever been in a position where you were expected to show up, smile, and swallow pain, just to keep the peace, type yes in the comments. You're not alone. And if you want to hear more true stories of quiet strength turning into loud victories, subscribe now and join this growing community. With Ezra by my side, the plan started to take shape. It wasn't revenge, it was reclaiming space. The dress, crimson silk, sleek, unapologetic. The car, a vintage convertible, Ezra had flown in just for the occasion. But most importantly, the energy I carried, power. Not the brittle kind that tries to hurt back, but the rooted kind that comes from surviving fire and learning to love your reflection in the ash. I didn't care about Dylan. I didn't hate Felicity. What I wanted was simple: to walk into that wedding and remind them who they tried to erase. I wasn't going there to make peace. I was going to make an impression. The wedding was held at a vineyard just outside Seattle, the kind of place with white rose arches and champagne fountains designed to impress people more than create memories. Ezra picked me up in a vintage navy blue convertible, his jacket sharp, his presence sharper. I wore the crimson silk dress we'd picked out together, a deliberate contrast to Felicity's fairy tale theme. It fit me like armor. As we pulled up to the valet, conversations paused. Heads turned. One woman even lowered her sunglasses to get a better look. Ezra took my hand and kissed the back of it like a scene from a movie. Ready to reclaim your stage? I nodded, but my heart thundered so loud I thought the ground could feel it. Inside, I saw familiar faces, most of them twisted with surprise. Aunts who hadn't returned my calls, cousins who watched the family unravel and said nothing. Even Dylan's college roommate did a double take when he saw Ezra, but no one reacted more visibly than Felicity. Her smile cracked the second she saw me walk in. Her jaw stiffened, eyes narrowing slightly, before she forced a sugary grin and made her way toward us. "Vivian," she chirped, overacting like she was in a sitcom. "I'm so glad you came." "And who's this?" Ezra extended his hand coolly. "Ezra Langston. Pleasure to meet the bride." Her eyes flinched at his name. Oh yes, she knew who he was. Then Dylan appeared. He froze. For a split second, I saw panic flash across his face, before he masked it with fake charm. "Viv, you look incredible," I smiled. "I know." Ezra placed a gentle hand on my back, and I watched Dylan's knuckles whiten around his glass. The ceremony began, but I barely paid attention. I kept my posture straight, chin high. This wasn't about watching two liars exchange vows. This was about standing unshaken in the space they thought they'd broken me out of. During the reception, speeches began. Felicity's best friend told a joke about how Dylan had finally stopped being distracted. Everyone laughed except Ezra. He stood raising his glass. "To Felicity and Dylan, may your future be built on trust, honesty, and clear communication, especially after such a complicated journey. Not everyone gets a second chance to build a life together. I hope you use it wisely." The room fell into an awkward hush. Ezra smiled politely, took a sip, and sat down. Felicity's cheeks flushed. Dylan avoided eye contact. People began whispering. One guest leaned over and asked me, "Was that Ezra Langston?" I nodded. "The investor," I nodded again. "Wow. I didn't know you two were—" She didn't finish. She didn't need to. Later, I found a quiet spot near the vineyard's stone fountain. I needed air. That's when Felicity approached me, her bouquet forgotten somewhere behind her. "What are you doing, Vivian?" she asked, her voice low but shaking. "Existing," I replied. "Which for some reason seems to really bother you." Her lip trembled. "You were always the perfect one. The one everyone admired. I just wanted something that was mine. So you took what wasn't yours," I said calmly. "You don't get to justify betrayal with envy." She stood there stunned and wordless as I turned and walked away. Not storming, not crying, just walking head high, power reclaimed. Ezra was waiting by the car. He opened the door without a word, and I stepped in, leaving the chaos behind me, like smoke in the rear view. I thought that walking away from Felicity at the fountain would be the end of it, that I delivered my message and reclaimed my dignity. But some stories don't end with a single scene. Some ghosts insist on one final act. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a text from Felicity. "Can we talk, just the two of us?" I hesitated. Everything in me screamed no. But curiosity, or maybe compassion, answered yes. We met at a cafe downtown Neutral Ground. She arrived in a beige coat, no makeup, and eyes that had clearly not slept. She looked less like the gleaming bride from yesterday, and more like the confused little sister I remembered from childhood. "You came," she said quietly. "Don't read too much into it," I replied, sipping my coffee. There was a long pause before she finally spoke. "I ruined everything, didn't I?" I stayed silent. She stared at her hands. "Do you know what it's like growing up in your shadow? You were always the star grades, career friends, Dylan. Everyone just assumed I'd never measure up." I sighed. "So you thought the solution was to burn it all down?" Her voice cracked. "I didn't plan it. Dylan and I. It just happened. He told me you were drifting, that you didn't love him anymore, that you wanted out, but didn't know how to say it." I stared at her, stunned. "So instead of talking to me, you believed the man I was about to marry. I wanted to believe it," she admitted, her voice raw. "Because then it made what we were doing seem less disgusting." The anger that had simmered for months flared up again, but this time it wasn't the kind that begged to be expressed. It was cold, detached, and sharp. "You didn't just steal my fiancé Felicity. You stole my sense of family. You made me doubt whether I ever truly belonged with the people I called mine." She wiped her eyes. "I know. And I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed you to know I'm not okay either." I looked at her for a long moment. For the first time, I saw past the selfishness and into the mess of insecurity and desperate approval seeking that had always been there. "You're right," I said. "You're not okay. But that doesn't excuse what you did." I stood up. "We're not enemies, Felicity. But we're not sisters right now either." Outside, the air hit me like clarity. Ezra was waiting nearby as promised. He didn't ask what happened. He just opened the car door and let me sit with my silence. We drove along the coast for hours, not saying much, just letting the sea and wind untangle everything left unspoken. At one point, he reached over and took my hand. Not as a grand gesture, not for show, just something real. I looked out at the ocean and realized something that I hadn't admitted even to myself. I didn't want revenge anymore. I wanted peace. And somewhere between the betrayal and this quiet moment, I'd started to find it. Not through closure, not through apologies, but by standing in my own truth and refusing to shrink for anyone again. In the days that followed, I felt something I hadn't experienced in a long time: stillness. Not numbness, not denial, just stillness. A quiet confidence that I didn't need to fight anymore to prove my worth. I didn't return Felicity's text after our meeting. I didn't need to. She'd said her piece, and I had said mine. There was nothing more to unearth between us, no hidden closure to chase. What had been broken wouldn't be put back together the way it was. And maybe that was okay. Instead, I turned inward. I spent more time alone than I had in years, not because I was avoiding people, but because I was finally listening to myself. I went back to journaling, something I hadn't done since college. I wrote without filters: rage, sorrow, guilt, healing. I let the words bleed until they stopped hurting. Ezra kept his presence steady, never pushing, never expecting. We went on long drives, shared midnight sushi, and laughed about the absurdity of life. He never asked me for promises, and that's exactly why I started to trust him with mine. Then, one evening, he showed up with tickets to a cabin near Mount Rainier. "Just a weekend," he said. "No pressure, just peace." We spent 2 days hiking trails, cooking terrible pancakes, and talking about everything except the past. On the final night, as we sat by the fire, Ezra looked at me and said, "You're not broken, Vivian. You're just no longer willing to break for people who wouldn't do the same for you." I didn't respond. I just let that sentence settle into my bones like truth. What I've learned is this: closure is overrated. You don't need everyone to understand you. You don't need revenge to feel powerful. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away without burning everything down. Sometimes healing is quiet. Sometimes the loudest statement you'll ever make is the life you choose to build after being shattered. Felicity and Dylan, I heard through a mutual friend that things weren't going so smoothly, but I didn't feel triumphant. I felt nothing, because their chaos wasn't mine anymore. I'd stepped out of their story and started writing my own. If you've ever had to rebuild after betrayal, if you've learned to carry your worth without needing others to validate it, drop a yes in the comments. And if Vivian's story reminded you of your own strength, don't forget to subscribe. There are more voices like hers, and maybe one of them is yours. Because this isn't the end. It's just where the real story begins.